everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're continuing our look into retro gaming hardware. As you recall, we took a look at the GCW Zero a few weeks ago, which was a great open source handheld that I've been really getting a lot of use out of. I'm really enjoying it. But a viewer, Davius, wrote in and said, hey, you should check out the Archos Gamepad 2 because it has a lot more horsepower. It can do a lot more because it runs Android and it's kind of a little bit of a beefier system. So I went out and thought I bought a Gamepad 2. It turns out I only got the one, so this is it here. It's a little less powerful, but it costs the same as the GCW. So this is actually a good one-to-one comparison of where your money can go. It is a lot bigger than the GCW. As you can see, the GCW doesn't even take up its entire screen size. This is like a 7-inch Android tablet. It's got a dual-core Cortex processor. The Gamepad 2, I could not find one. And I thought, like I said, I thought I was buying a Gamepad 2 when this showed up. But the Gamepad 2 costs a bit more because it's kind of a higher-end device with a quad-core CPU and everything else. So we're going to, though, take a look and kind of step through it. And I have to say, I'm really not impressed with the controls on it. They're very springy. The control sticks here aren't very precise, and that was kind of a disappointment, especially because this one's nothing to shout at either on the GCW, but it does feel better here than it does here. The other problem I had was that they put the L2 and R2 buttons on the front because they couldn't fit them on the top because the device is very thin. And the result is that if you're playing a game where you're holding down like one button and need to push the other one, so like like a BA kind of scenario, XA in this case, your thumb hits this button because it's actually raised higher than the other ones. It's kind of hard to see on here, but this button is very much higher than these two, and it's very easy to hit that. So that was kind of a disappointment. But I have to say, though, it does feel nice in the hand, even though the controller isn't all that precise. It doesn't have much in the hardware department. It's got an HDMI out, and in fact, we're running it right now through my scaler, so you can see here that it can actually do a mirror display to 1080p, which is pretty cool. Headphone jack, power switch, volume up and down, those two rocker controls that I showed before. Nothing on the sides, and it does have room for a micro SD card at the bottom, although a lot of retro emulators don't support those cards, so you'll need to move data onto the device itself. One other thing of note is for the modern Android games that don't have joystick support, although a lot of them are beginning to do that now, there's a special overlay feature where you can take this little overlay thing here and drag buttons onto where the touchscreen button would correspond. So if I was playing a game where there was a button where I had to push on screen, I could move this over here, map it to the A button, and anytime I hit the A button, it'll tell the gamepad to register that screen push, which is really cool. It's a way to get tactile controls on games that were not designed to use the joystick. The other nice thing is that the gamepad built into this is compatible with the Google standard API for game controls. So any game that supports a joystick will support this out of the box, which is pretty cool. You probably may have to map some controls around and stuff because things tend to be a little bit different from device to device, but it works quite well. So we're not going to really play too much on the modern side because we really wanted to see how this thing held up for retro performance. And I will say that without question, it's going to support like the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo just fine. I'll show you the Super Nintendo in a minute, but this is an Android handheld. It's an ARM Cortex dual-core processor, so any Android emulator that you like and love on your phone is going to run, more than likely will run on this, so you don't have to worry about that. But what we're going to do is check out stuff that taxes the hardware a little bit more. Specifically, we're going to look at the Dreamcast first, and there's an emulator called Recast, so we're going to load that up real quick, and I just got to go find where my Soul Calibur is. I have a Dreamcast, and I own Soul Calibur. I bought this game right when it came out. This is like a launch title. And I have to say, I was impressed that the Archos can really keep up with Dreamcast games. The emulator's a little glitchy in the video department, but the fact that it can run these quite well and mirror the display out to 1080p at the same time is really pretty cool. And I found that to be quite useful. So we're going to just skip through the screens here and get into the game real quick so you can see how it functions. I'm just going to select 60 Hertz. I did find that I couldn't really map the start button all that well. But the other ones do work, and this supports the joystick natively, so you can turn off those screen controls. You can see there's a little bit of glitchiness going on here, but what we're really after here is the frame rate and what the power of the system is, because they can always improve the emulator and make it work better. The frame rate is actually, and you'll see here in a second, really decent. I was surprised with how good it was, especially because this is not the most expensive device in the world. But there you go. So it's a little bit glitchy, and again, that's the emulator kind of doing its thing, but the models of the characters seem to be really holding up quite well, and the graphics are really, really decent for for an older game, but also the fact that it runs as well as it does here is pretty cool. The next one we're going to check out is Final Burn Alpha, which is an arcade emulator, and we looked at that on the GCW and found that Afterburner 2 was ran okay, but it wasn't as fast as it was in the arcade. So here it is running on the GCW. This is again through an Android emulator called AFBA, and it's kind of nice. It actually has a whole bunch of information on the game and some screenshots. This is all stuff that it downloaded itself, so it kind of looks for what ROMs you have and makes it work. And here you go. It loads up pretty quickly, and it seems to run fairly nicely. We're seeing a little bit of lines on there, but I think that might be a combination of my scaler running and doing some funky stuff to it. There is, and I know somebody wrote in a few weeks ago saying that I need to talk more about the video filters available. There are video filters available on this emulator, so you can apply different settings to it. So I think we could go in here. I think it's here. We can set up different scan lines, so we can give it it looks a little flaky on my display here, but on the actual device it looks pretty cool. You can set up all sorts of different scan line emulations to make it look like it did back in the day. But as you can see, it runs with all the filtering and the fact that we're using a mirroring thing going on. It actually runs really well. So I have to say that that is an impressive little display of its capabilities. All right, the last thing we're going to check out is just a Super Nintendo game, so you can see how that works. And by the way, I did try MAME on it also, and I found MAME just didn't work too well. The controls were kind of funky. In fact, I couldn't push more than one button at a time, and I don't know if it was just some of the mapping was messed up, or maybe they need to update the emulator a little bit better. There is an emulator for like a multi-emulator system called RetroArch, which I didn't really get a chance to play too much with yet, but I think it'll run fine once you get everything configured and operating. So the $150 question is, which one of these systems is best for retro gaming? And I think it really depends on what your definition of retro gaming is. Now, I'm 37, so for me, retro gaming is Atari, Coleco, Nintendo, the Genesis. Kind of cut it off right at the end of the 16-bit era. For those games, I think the GCW is the better choice. And the reason is it has better controls, first of all, especially the gamepad is just so much better than what I'm finding here on the Archos. But also because its screen is smaller and of lower resolution. This screen is 320 by 240. Which is very, very close to the native resolution of all of those retro gaming systems. So they really look a lot nicer on the GCW. And I like the smaller screen too. If I'm having a portable system, this is really not so portable to me. But for newer stuff, especially all the current Android games, but Dreamcast and PlayStation and GameCube and Saturn, all those more modern emulators, they'll probably run better on this, mainly because it has a lot more horsepower and the fact that the screen is a little bit bigger and this resolution is higher. So those higher resolution games will probably look a little bit better on this. So it's kind of a trade-off. The battery life on this isn't so great. The Archos 2, from what I've been reading, has better battery life. Again, I thought I bought the Archos 2, but I ended up with this one. But I can almost see the battery kind of drip away on this thing. So you may want to have a plug or a backup booster battery nearby whenever you're gaming on it. But yeah, so I think I'm going to take a look at maybe the NVIDIA Shield, and if I can get a hold of the Archos 2, maybe check that out as well. But I think for retro gaming, this is still where it's going to be at for me, at least for some time until something better comes around. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.